Thank you for attending session 5, Threat Actors in Your Workplace Environment. I'm Matthew Ferrante, partner in charge of the Withum Cyber Team, and it's my pleasure to present to you today. The contents contained within the slide deck may contain some basic and preliminary observations. We refer to some generally accepted principles for forensic investigations. What is forensics? It's applied science and technology for use in criminal, civil, regulatory, and fact-finding matters. So some of the stuff we may refer to may be open and active investigations. All observations are subject to further investigation and explanation of the facts and are therefore subject to change. Additional evidence and forensic analysis may be required to support any findings or observations. This is me, Matthew Ferrante. This is some of my summary background information. Some people say I have no life. I enjoy what I do, but this is what I love doing, and cybersecurity never sleeps. Neither do the hackers. So this is a 24/7 operation. I love what I do, and people who are in this field, you really need to be immersed into it. There really is no 9-to-5 job. It's really 24/7, and every day we're waking up to a new type of cyber attack that's innovative. The attackers are always innovative, and then we also have the advent of AI, artificial intelligence, and the hackers are utilizing that already. They're using that to invent new phishing schemes and using AI technology, even taking presentations like this where they can mimic my voice, mimic your CEO's voice to orchestrate social engineering or the art of manipulation to break into systems and infrastructure. Withum Cyber Services, these are the different cyber services that we offer. We offer everything from IT services, that's end-to-end IT managed services, security, interwoven into cyber services, very important in IT services. It should not be separate and apart. The secret ingredient to successful cybersecurity is that it's interwoven into business processes. It's interwoven into the organization. It's interwoven into the IT infrastructure. Incident response, very important. Impacts will happen to your organization. It's a fact of life. You want to be able to protect critical networks, critical systems, critical data. Very, very important. Understand that it's a fact of life. Most people don't want to accept it. Impacts will happen to your organization. The organizations that are ready for it can mitigate many cyber attacks and or minimize damage. We also do cyber forensics. Again, cyber forensics is applied science and technology for use in criminal, civil, regulatory, and fact-finding matters. It's very different than just an IT team, for example, taking data or collecting evidence. There's a distinct process that goes into that. Everything from identification of evidence, collection of evidence, preservation, processing, review, presentation, and if needed, presentation in a court of law or to provide to regulatory bodies. We also have a Withum Cyber Center, which operates 24/7, 365. Threat intelligence is important as well. What's going on about your organization? What's being brokered on the dark web? We have free security scores. So those who are interested in getting a security score for their organization, you can also email for one of the security scores. Then the next level would be open source intelligence report. What is being brokered on the dark web for your organizations? Are their email accounts being brokered? We found digital keys for organizations being brokered. An open source intelligence report looks at what are the threats specific to your industry, and then what are the threats specific to your organization. All right, let's begin. What is traditional warfare? This was the traditional battlefield. Soldiers, walking through the fog of war slowly, let's say through a forest. It's much different now. It's a much different battlefield that's going on today. This is the modern cyber warfare. This is the modern battlefield. And guess what? You're all part of it. Whether you like it or not, you're all part of it. Every business is part of this. We're all interwoven. Where network boundaries begin and where they end are much different than they were in the past. And then who's attacking our infrastructure? You have all different people while you're on different type of Zoom calls or you're having different meetings. This is what's going on in the bottom in the background. You are constantly being attacked. Your firewalls are mitigating a lot of these attacks, but they just need one time to get through your environment in order to be successful, whether it's the exfiltration of data and broker it on the dark web. The online organized crime, for example, is like a modern business. It is structured. They even have support centers. They even have marketing departments. I kid you not. They're there to broker your data. They're there for to maximize their profit. With that said, not every attack is going to be financially motivated. It's very important to understand that. In addition to that, like I said, this is going on all the time. They may be piggybacking off of your organization, stealing customer data in order to infiltrate other environments or your clients' environments. So who you operate with, who you're interconnected with is very important as well in order to have appropriate cybersecurity fitness for your environment. Modern business threats is everything like I mentioned, organized crime, cyber terrorism, nation state actors. People think that because they're a small enterprise or a medium-sized enterprise that they're not a target of nation-state actors. They absolutely are. We work with, for example, a small sprinkler and irrigation company, but they service government entities. They service amusement parks. They're targets because they can piggyback into these wider environments. Regulatory and legal sanctions, and you might see government up there. You say, well, how are they a threat? They're a threat to a business. The business's objective is to maximize profit. Government regulatory sanctions, they're coming down hard on cyber breaches, especially unreported ones, or where there's negligence and recklessness in the environment. Competitors, we've seen competitors being approached by hackers who have stolen data from competition, and they want to sell it to their competitors. They're bold at this point. Hacktivism, people hacking for political reasons or other reasons why they want to attack your organization. I'll give you an example. When they work for a bank, the bank didn't understand why they were being attacked by an animal rights group. It happened to be that they weren't even aware they had investments where there was testing being done on animals, and that's why the bank was being attacked. They didn't even state their demand, they just attacked the bank. Internal threats, again, doesn't mean malicious, could be inadvertent. Case in point, Facebook went down for about 6 hours because of a misconfiguration of a server. You might be able to say my organization could sustain going down for 6 hours. How about a week? How about 2 weeks? How about a month? There's many businesses, when they get hit by a serious cyber attack, they never come up again, and that's a fact. Current cyber stats and facts. Cybercrime damages globally, we're looking at $6 trillion. Distributed denial of service attacks is a global security crisis. We see 12 million attacks in 2021. This is a big issue. A lot of people hear ransomware. Yes, ransomware is a big problem where they're holding your data hostage, but that is not the only thing. Everyone just say, well, I have backups. One, are your backups good? Two, that's not the only way to knock infrastructure out. Extortion also works by attacking critical points of the organization that could potentially bring the organization down over a prolonged period of time. Ransomware attacks are occurring every 11 seconds. Top country targeted, United States. Estimated records exposed 146 billion between 2018 and 2023. This is the cost per record. Imagine how many records your organization has. And by the way, most organizations do not even know how many records they have. It gets very expensive very quick. Average cost of a data breach, 8.19 million. And Dark Web Cybercrime Toolkit still is operating cheap. It's only $1. Killware. Can devices and internet connected devices actually kill? Yes, they can. So while ransomware is financially motivated, killware is not financially motivated. Killware's intent is to cause physical death by targeting life-saving infrastructure, whether it's ER systems, critical life support systems, pacemakers. All these stuff are interconnected with monitoring devices. You can even cause a pacemaker to heat up, malfunction. These are the different risks. And your infrastructure, by the way, is being utilized as part of that. And you're gonna say, well, my infrastructure is being utilized. Yes, even home devices, internet or Internet of Things, IoT devices, toasters, dishwashers, computers, ships, planes, these are all interconnected with the internet. A bot or an internet bot is a web root or robot. It's a software application that runs on these IoT devices and takes tasks over the internet. There's 34 billion devices on the internet, IoT devices. that accounts for 2/3 of internet connected traffic. So here's an example of an IoT, Internet of Things, distributed denial of service attack. To give an example, to the right, you'll see these are the IoT devices, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's cloud devices, headphones, even smart glasses. These are all devices connected. What a hacker is going to do is want to take these devices over. Remember, they're 2/3 of the internet traffic. Distributed denial of service attack, what they want to do is essentially create zombies of these devices. Then what the hacker will do is they will look to compromise a web server. Show you that on the screen real quick. So what a hacker will do is they'll look to set up an encrypted channel. They'll look for a compromised web server, say an unpatched web server. Then what they'll do is they'll start scanning different IoT devices. They'll look for open ports. Once they compromise some of the IoT devices, what they'll also do is turn these devices into scanning systems to look for additional open ports. There's IoT devices are notoriously vulnerable and easy to infiltrate. Usually security is an afterthought for these different devices. After the devices start getting more and more compromised, the hacker becomes what's called a bot master. He sets up encrypted channels, uses the command and control web servers, and that's usually plural because if someone takes one down, there's usually multiple or backdoors to get into either that system or multiple web servers. Then he has a whole bunch of different bot networks. We're talking millions and millions of bot networks. Then the next phase of this is that what they normally do is they orchestrate an attack. This can be for extortion purposes, or like I mentioned before, killware, where they can actually attack, go through the internet, go through routers, different ISPs, and then attack their targets, like a critical server or life monitoring support systems, pacemakers, other devices of that nature. How to protect your business from cyber attacks. We say know your enemy and know yourself. Most organizations do not know themselves. They do not know that their attack surface, for example, has significantly grown. Most of the people are working from home. That means their environment, their risks have grown. Knowing your enemy, knowing who your threats are for your industry, getting a threat actor report that understands who the threat actors are for your industry, what they're commonly going to target, knowing where your potentially impact is at, where you're going to be potentially impacted prior to impacts happening is critical. And then knowing your infrastructure as well, and really knowing it. What is EISP? It's Enterprise Information Security Policy. Every organization, regardless of industry, requires one. It is also referred to as a security program policy. This is what outlines the roles and responsibility to ensure effective cybersecurity. EISP must support the organization's missions, strategic objectives, as well as the role of information security in achieving them. Very important. Need a governance framework. What is governance? It's the organization's policy, language, processes. It addresses the dependence on cyberspace in the presence of adversaries. In order to have appropriate cybersecurity governance framework, you need leadership buy-in, and that starts from the CEO down. You need a head of cybersecurity. It needs to be that person that when something goes wrong, you can point the finger in their chest and they're responsible and they're accountable. Very, very important, a level of accountability. There needs to be clear policies and processes that are outlined for your organization, and there needs to be an organization culture of cybersecurity. Cybersecurity culture, by the way, doesn't simply emerge because policies and procedures are clearly outlined. Instead, leaders must make clear through their actions that cybersecurity is essential to their organization. Case in point, Yahoo in the past was breached multiple times. There wasn't a culture of security. There wasn't leadership buy-in. They were breached while they were being looked at for a purchase through Verizon. They lost $325 million on the purchase price because Verizon didn't feel that they had the leadership, they had the appropriate controls in place to protect the organization. So $325 million taken off of an M&A acquisition. You might say, well, I'm not as big as Yahoo. Doesn't matter. If you look to sell your business, if you're looking to acquire a business, this is stuff. And by the way, we do due diligence on M&As. We've done due diligence on an organization where we've even identified that the organization was breached and their environment was grossly exposed. and it wasn't anything super sophisticated. If they just kicked the tires themselves and looked at the environment, they would have been able to shore up the environment, which does not have to be expensive. By the way, security does not equal expensive. Then there needs to be an incident response plan. As I mentioned in the beginning, incidents are going to happen, impacts are going to happen. If you know ahead of time, you're going to be able to mitigate them. I explained this similar to a boxer. The hardest hits a boxer will take are the hits they never see coming. It's the same thing for your organization. If you see them coming, and typically you can, because you're not going to be the only organization being hit by these, you'll be able to mitigate a lot of critical impacts to your organization. And by the way, it's always cheaper being proactive than reactive and dealing with it afterhand. It's actually a shame when organizations are impacted, especially critical impacts, and then they look to fix cybersecurity after. It's far more expensive. In addition to that, they often spend their money on lawsuits, defending their environment, PR nightmares, and the likes, where they could have invested in their own infrastructure. Governance framework program aims to strategically align the cybersecurity with business strategies. Again, cybersecurity doesn't live in a bubble by itself. It must be aligned to business objectives. Very important. I've seen IT infrastructure that's not aligned to the business. Cybersecurity, same thing. It needs to be aligned to the business. It needs to be a holistic approach aligned to business objectives. Risk management support via enforcing necessary controls. Yes, if you have policies and procedures, you need to make sure that you're enforcing it through necessary controls. You reduce impact of breaches on information resources, cybersecurity knowledge and infrastructure. Knowledge of your infrastructure, very, very important. A lot of organizations are going, as I mentioned before, have no knowledge, real knowledge of their infrastructure. CIA triad, it's not CIA, we're not talking about the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA triad model is designed to guide policies and information security within an organization. It's about the confidentiality of your data, the integrity, as well as the availability. It involves products, physical people, process, technology, and validation. Confidentiality. Your confidentiality of your data is not just data at rest. It involves your critical networks. It involves critical systems and critical data. Ask yourself, do we really know where our confidential data resides? How do we know how our confidential data is being used and maintained? By the way, that extends beyond your borders. If your vendors are using your data, you're still responsible. You can no longer just say, well, that's in their networks. No, it's still, if it's part of your data and you're sharing that with third-party vendors, like managed service providers, you're still responsible as well. Do you know whether that confidential data is leaking from the environment? And are you in compliance, for example, with data privacy laws? The integrity of data is important, whether that data is localized and or in the cloud. You need to consider protecting the integrity of your data while it's at rest, let's say on storage devices, while that data is in use, meaning that you're actively using that data, and while that data is in transit. Another good example is backups. We've had organizations that were hit. Their backups were not good. They didn't know that they can restore it. So one of the things that hackers will go for is the integrity of that data, where you will question whether that data is even good to even restore it. Availability of systems. Consider how long can your business sustain an outage. Consider cyber attacks beyond having just backups. So when we talk about your environment, the availability of that environment. Cloud, by the way, when people talk cloud, we've seen cloud providers being hacked. So it doesn't mean that it's always AWS, doesn't mean that it's just Microsoft. Just because you move to cloud does not equate to security by itself. Localized environments. First of all, if your environment looks like this, you're part of the problem, okay? So if it looks like this physically, what do you think it looks like electronically? Localized environments is one method. Another thing is cloud, as I mentioned before. Again, cloud does not equal security. There's advantages and disadvantages to cloud. Cloud is somebody else's computer. It still needs to be secured. It still needs to be appropriately designed. Just because Microsoft and Amazon are secure does not mean that you are secure. Hybrid environments, spoiler alert, are the best because it takes the cloud into account. It takes a localized environment, and then you have a level of redundancy for your backups and your infrastructure. As I mentioned before, cloud is simply somebody else's environment. You are going to be relying on that other environment. So for example, case in point, Amazon's environment, they had a lot of public pressure for Parler. Forget about where your politics are. Parler's whole network infrastructure was in place in Amazon's environment. They were valued at $1 billion. Amazon kicked them out. It crippled them. It crushed them. Think about if you had to move all of your data out of all of your systems and data out of Amazon's cloud environment, especially while your infrastructure is running there. Moreover, those environments are definitely a target for nation state actors as well. So if they get hit, are they going to be responsible and accountable for your environment? Not saying don't move to the cloud. It just needs to be carefully considered where you place those assets, how it's distributed amongst those environments, and there needs to be skill in terms of designing and running and maintaining those networks as well. And again, there needs to be appropriate assessments done on those environments. Network boundaries, what boundaries I mentioned before. This is what an attack surface looks like for an organization. Now, if you took about a quarter of this is what they looked like before the pandemic, the little dots, and then after the pandemic on the bottom is how their environment grew after. So we did a scan and that's what it looked like after. So probably take about a quarter of this, that's what it was before. This is what it looks like now. So IT departments and managed service providers, we see a lot of data breaches going on, within these environments. And there's different methodologies that can be applied. Some people say, hey, I trust them. They're good guys. I worked with them for a long time. Trust, today's modern business environment in cyber, it's not good. Trust but verify, good, but not good enough. And it used to be trust but verify, and that was enough. Then it was verify, then trust. That's better. What's even best? A zero trust architecture and a zero trust methodology. You must test environments. You can't go by IT gospel that IT says it's good and therefore we don't need to check. Independently verify through an independent party. Is your environment really good? Is it as IT says it is? Do not let IT select your independent vendors. That should be done by the C-suite and or board where they have them independently check those environments. By the way, breaches, 85% caused by human error, 85%. Cyber insurance, I've seen good policies, I've seen bad policies. Guess what, folks? The insurers, they're not in the business for paying out claims. So we see that the cyber insurance policy, we're getting more and more of cyber insurance policies to review. We've worked on over $2 billion worth of claims. We worked for the insurers. We worked on the other half, doing due diligence for the people who are victims of cyber attacks and then are trying to put a claim in. Be careful. For example, if you're hit by ransomware, it doesn't mean that you have cyber insurance, doesn't mean that they're going to be able to pay the ransomware because there's OFAC list or the Department of Treasury that if you pay a ransom to somebody who's on a do not pay list, for example, Iran, or other people on the OFAC list, you can be fined up to $10 million and or in prison. So an insurance provider is not going to facilitate that payment either. In addition to that, where there's policy exclusions, for example, acts of war, and ransomware is traced back to Iran, that would be considered an act of war, and therefore they may not pay out the claim and you may not get that level of support. In addition, you want to be mindful of who is selected, who you get to select after an impact. Is it going to be someone that only the insurance provider provides on an approved list of vendors? If that said, who are they actually working for, the insurer or for you? Be careful. 5 principles of a cybersecurity culture: transparency, accountability, appropriate system knowledge, compliance with policies and procedures, formal communication channels. There should be no delays in reporting. There should be an emphasis on the importance of reporting. Define the consequences for unreported issues. Update protocols, policies, and procedures. And guess what? Have open discussions about it. This is what's going to make a strong cybersecurity culture within your organization. Modern cyber assessments, a risk assessment. I see a lot of this. I ask for a penetration test. I get a risk assessment. A risk assessment broadly it identifies and analyzes potential events that may negatively impact individuals' assets or the environment. It is much different than, for example, a VCSO looking at your security strategy, the controls, and the frameworks that are aligned to your business, whether it's PCI frameworks, whether it's NIST. Some organizations do not even know what frameworks they should align to or why a specific security control framework was selected. You want to select various frameworks. Sometimes it's more than one that align to regulatory compliance, policies, procedures, and the type of data that you're protecting. Whether it's PCI data, whether it's PII data, is different frameworks and security controls should be selected in that manner. Red teaming penetration testing. This is where you get where the rubber hits the road, where you want to do ethical hacking, both from the outer perimeter as well as the inner perimeter. The inner perimeter is just as important as your outer perimeter. Purple teaming. If you think that your security is at the next level, purple teaming takes defenders and then people who are attackers, and they work collaboratively to fix stuff in almost real time to constantly tweak the cybersecurity of the environment. Cybersecurity is not set and forget it. You always are constantly adjusting and escalating your cyber defenses as a proactive approach, because if you're not, guess what? The attackers are. Conducting a business impact analysis. This looks at critical systems, networks, and data, the stuff that's critical to your organization, the stuff that if your organization's hit, it can knock your organization out, whether it's in the cloud, localized environment, systems, critical data. Are you protecting what matters to the business? And if those critical assets are impacted, what does that cost to your organization? There's a difference between business continuity and business backups. Just because you have business backups does not mean that you have business continuity. As I mentioned before, there's different ways to bring down an organization, not just ransomware attacks. It looks at stuff that could be digital denial of service attack, supply chain attacks, or supply chain issues. We've seen infrastructure go down where a specific component, a critical component, did not allow an organization to get back up, and it took time and delays because of supply chain issues, especially with chip shortages. Case in point, large banking institution went down, all their ATMs went down across Europe, and it was because of one card, one flaw in the software in a card, a vulnerability that brought all of the ATMs down. Imagine what the impact was and the cost was to them. Cyber insurance analysis. I always say this, Noah built the ark before it rained, not after. Have that looked at before, because it may not be worth the ink that's placed on that piece of paper. You must have it looked at before. Questions? Any questions? Feel free to ask them now. If not, my contact information is below. As you probably realize, I get a lot of emails, so I get a lot of email overload. If you email wcyber.pm, the message will get to me and or someone in the team who can appropriately answer your questions. Thank you for joining the session today, and stay cyber secure and stay vigilant. Thank you.